How's everyone doing?
All right. So we're going to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about real estate.
Let's do it.
A subject you're very familiar with.
A little bit.
Right?
Try.
So before we even get into Picasso and some of the specifics, let's give the audience a little bit of your background so that they understand some context and your familiarity with the subject matter. So tell me when real estate sort of first began for you.
Yeah, sounds great. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. Nobody told me I had to follow Martha.
Well, it's a tough act to follow,
It
to
is
be
a tough
sure,
act,
but this is
I'll
going to
do
be
my
so
best.
good.
So my dad was a carpenter, and I grew up around homes my entire life. And when I was 18 years old, I started selling real estate and sold all through college and then went to law school after undergrad. And that led to my first business, which was a technology solution called Dotloop that empowers people to sell homes digitally. And we built that company over a period of 5 or 6 years and then sold to Zillow in 2015. And I stayed on there for about 4 years. And along the way, I bought a second home. And that's where the birth of my new company, Pacaso, originated.
Okay. So now let's tell the audience briefly what Picasso is and what it's all about so they understand the context.
Yeah, so basically Picasso is a platform that empowers people to co-own second homes together. So the easiest way to get your mind around it is imagine if you and 4 or 5 of your friends decided that you wanted to own a house together in the Hamptons or Miami or Aspen. Picasso basically empowers you to do that, but we handle all the details. Everything from bill pay to maintenance to scheduling. We provide a software and a marketplace that empowers people to co-own homes more efficiently. And the reason why we created this company is because there are a lot of empty homes sitting around the world. The average second home is only utilized about 5 weeks per year. And there's about 120 million second homes around the world, and most of them sit vacant for 10 months per year. And there's also hundreds of millions of families who aspire to own second homes but can't afford the whole second home that they want. And frankly, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to own 100% of a home that you're only going to use 10% of the time. So that's where it originated.
And what did you, in your time at Zillow and in sort of throughout your career in the industry, what did you learn about sort of second home ownership and what that market could potentially look like that made you sort of pick this area to focus on? Because it seems like you could have gone anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And they talked about some of this in the last session around just, living in the moment and getting the most out of life every single day. And I mentioned that the Picasso idea was originated for me when my wife and I became second homeowners in Lake Tahoe. Prior to that moment, we were like most families who dreamed about owning a second home but couldn't afford it. And we did it. We put all of our savings down on this property and had to rent the home out on Airbnb to pay the bills. And it just fundamentally enriched our lives. So to answer your question, what really motivated me and our company with this business is the opportunity to enrich people's lives. Second homes create this place where you can build memories with people that you love and people that you care about. And there's something that's just different about the second home. It's not, in fact, it's not even just the home, it's the community. Like when you buy a second home, you're sort of unlocking this chapter to a second life. It's where you make memories and make new friends and develop these rituals that become really important to who we are. And the pandemic, while demand for second homes has existed for a long time, the pandemic intensified this demand in sort of an unprecedented way for a couple of reasons. I think one is more people have the freedom to work remote, either part-time or full-time. So the idea of using a second home 5 or 6 weeks a year is more practical now than it ever was before. And I think it also taught us that life is short. So we might as well live in the moment and get the most out of it. And a lot more people now are looking to realize their dreams, more sort of ambitiously and proactively than they were before.
And how did you think specifically about the structure that you created for the share? So explain a little deeper for people how one acquires a fraction of a second home with Picasso.
Yeah, you bet. So this co-ownership concept that I described is actually super common. I mean, there's tens of thousands of homes in almost every market that are already owned this way, either friends that own properties together or family members that decide to own property together. but it's very hard to own property with other people, whether you know them or not, because you can't get financing that doesn't encumber everybody from a liability perspective. It's hard to figure out who gets, what dates. It's hard to resell an interest in a property that's owned by a small group of people. So I discovered that this concept had already existed, but it's very hard to do today. So we said, well, what if we could make it easy? What if we could take all those hassles and risks associated with that old model and sort of apply sharing economy, business model, and technological innovation to this concept that's been around for a long time, and really unlock second home ownership to a whole new category of people.
Okay, so I see people are sort of nodding their heads. So you mentioned sort of the sharing economy and some of the technology behind it. That seemed to sort of resonate with people. So conceptually, you started buying some homes, yes, and sort of making them Picasso ready?
Yeah, so we started the company. So I left Zillow at the beginning of 2019, and I took a year off to sort of think about what I wanted to do next and travel the world a little bit. And my co-founder of Pacaso, he and I had known each other for a long time. He was the co-founder of Zillow and the CEO for a long time. So he and I started talking about various ideas, and this was one that I was really passionate about. And we spent I'm a big quote guy. I know there was a quote mentioned in the last session, but one of my favorite quotes is an Albert Einstein quote where he says that if you had 60 minutes to save the world, you should spend 55 minutes understanding the problem and only 5 minutes on the solution. So I spent that whole year that I took off thinking about this problem. I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of customers and ran surveys and stuff like that. So by the time we were ready to launch the company, which we did our first round of financing in February of last year, and we tested and iterated, and we were ready to launch Pacaso.com on October 1st. So it's been about a year now. Yeah, we've been off to the races ever since, but it started with buying one home. We actually talked to we talked to our customers and asked them what they were looking for, and we started marketing to prospective homes that we thought would be of interest. And an interesting connection with this audience is our first home that we ever sold was actually, I don't know if you all are familiar with a guy named Jay Jeffers, but Jay...
I'm guessing you are.
I knew it was a big deal in our area, but it's great that you all know Jay. Fantastic guy, him and his husband, Michael. I've gotten to know him, and they're good friends now. But we basically found a list of properties. We just downloaded property records, and we started sending mailers and emails to random people who owned homes that we thought would be a fit. And we came across Jay's home. He owned a second home in St. Helena. But like most second homeowners, he only used it like a couple weeks a year. So we have this concept with Picasso where you can sell part of your home. And Jay basically sold part of his home through Picasso. So we put it on our website, attracted a lot of buyers, and sold it out in 30 days. And then we were off to the races.
And you get to own part of Jay Jeffers' beautifully designed home in St. Helena.
Yep.
Yeah, which is a pretty nice deal. So you mentioned community earlier, and we're talking about St. Helena, and as you and I have talked about in the past, not everybody was thrilled about Picasso rolling into town, right? So there were some perhaps misconceptions about what you were all about, or there was some people were a little anxious about what was going on next door. Tell me a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, so pretty much any company I've ever seen or been a part of that was doing something new and interesting faced resistance along the way. I mean, even my last company, Dotloop, where we were doing basically e-signatures for real estate transactions, which should be like the most uncontroversial thing on the planet. But for 5 years, we met resistance and critics who thought that e-signatures would not be secure or not be enforceable. So any company that's making a difference faces resistance. So we have faced some resistance in Napa and Sonoma in particular. And really the root of it is housing's a sensitive topic, particularly right now and in second home communities. And the reason why it's a sensitive topic is because we're in the middle of a housing affordability crisis. And that housing affordability crisis is most pronounced in second home markets because there's a shortage of supply. There's just not enough homes for sale, and new construction can't keep up with the demand needs. And there's a new influx of demand, meaning there's more people who are looking to buy second homes in these markets now, and that's driving up prices. So the frustration and the concern is that we're taking homes away from the local workforce. But the reality is actually the opposite of that. Co-ownership is actually part of the housing affordability solution and not part of the problem. And the reason why is because with this model, we're consolidating demand, people who would have otherwise been buying median-priced homes, and we're moving them into luxury-priced homes that are co-owned. Because like in Napa, the median price is $800,000, and our average is $4 million. So we're taking people who would have otherwise been buying the $800,000 home, and we're empowering them to co-own a $4 or $5 million home at the luxury tier. But it takes time for the world to understand that. And
to understand what you're doing. And it sounds like, and you've talked about this sort of being a learning experience for you, it sounds like you've tried to get more involved locally with communities and local officials and sort of.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you all are entrepreneurs and business owners, and it's work. Every single day we're learning and growing as individuals and as a company, and the faster you grow, like the more work it is to kind of stay on top of that. And we've been growing super fast. We launched about a year ago, and now we're in about 25 cities or 25 destinations around the country, and we're expanding into Europe right now. We're announcing Spain tomorrow as our first European market. So
really, so
yeah,
I mean, you're basically announcing it right here at the Future of Home conference.
Yep.
Okay.
I gave you that little Easter egg.
Thank you.
Don't tell anybody, please.
Well, so and I mean, I was curious about that because if ever a business seems scalable, it certainly seems your platform and the concept seems scalable.
Well, yeah, it's totally scalable. I mean, it's not easy though. I mean, we're at the intersection of people, technology, and real estate, and it's non-trivial to do all those things well at scale. But in terms of the opportunity here, I mean, we think this is the future of second home ownership. I mean, we really do. There's 120 million second homes around the world, as I mentioned, and only 5.5 million of those homes are rented out on Airbnb or Vrbo. Most second homeowners don't want renters in their home because renters treat property like renters, and owners tend to treat property like owners because they have more skin in the game and they're committed to the home and the community long term. So we think there's an opportunity here to empower millions and millions of people to realize their dream and live a more enriched life through the second home reality. But it's gonna take a while. It's a big mission that hopefully will play out over decades.
Well, I want to go back to the Jay Jeffers story in part because I want to hear how you think about making design decisions for these homes, because it seems like in many cases you're making some updates. It sounds like you're working with local designers in the community oftentimes. Tell me about, there's a lot of designers in the crowd that might want to participate in all of this, so tell me how you think about
Yeah, absolutely. Design. So we partner with designers and pretty much all of our markets, and what our owners are looking for is, I mean, we loosely describe it as livable luxury. Like when they show up at their home, it's not just about the function, it's about how it makes them feel in that environment. Because as I mentioned, a second home purchase in particular is a discretionary purchase. It's not like you have to own a second home. So when people reach and make that purchase, they really want to feel like they're in their special place when they arrive at that home. So it means that it's, state of the art and luxury. They tend to like, obviously the styles vary by location, meaning, the way that we style a home in a mountain town like Aspen or Lake Tahoe would be different than the way that we style a home in Miami or Malibu. But I would say the common theme is like sort of clean, modern, and finished, like every little detail being thought about. And we were really fortunate that our first home was Jay's home, because we learned a lot about what product market fit felt like. And still to this day, I don't know that we've really matched the Jay Jeffers home, because people walked into the home and every little detail had been thought about. And when you're there, I mean, you really feel like you're in your happy place. So that's the broad way that I would describe it. The other thing that we see a lot of is we see a lot of emphasis on entertaining and indoor-outdoor space, entertainment space in particular. So we, spend a lot of time and energy thinking about how people would spend their time entertaining their friends or family, because whereas a primary home, oftentimes you're in the home by yourself with just your family. In a secondary home, people are often entertaining their friends or family members, and some of these other spaces become more important in that setting.
It was funny to hear in an earlier talk that there was a perception that so many designers want to work on Airbnbs or sort of temporary spaces. I think that a lot of designers would love to work on this model. Tell me sort of as you roll things out, how you think about, I mean, I know you have some internal people, but you work with a lot of local designers. Tell me how you're imagining sort of scaling the. Not every home can be a J. Jeffers home, as you say, but there are plenty of designers that can provide a really high-level experience for your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that there's a few opportunities that come to mind. One is the obvious one of just, engaging with us as an extension of our team. And given that we're only doing a certain number of homes and per month, there's not enough work to go around per se for everyone, but we do try to identify a local designer or two that we partner with in various markets. And as I mentioned, right now we're in about 25 destinations, and we'll probably double that over the course of the next 12 months. So if you're in a second home destination around the US or throughout Europe, there's probably an opportunity for us to work together in that capacity. The other thing that we've seen play out is that use case that I described before around Jay's home. We call it a sell down internally. Many of you have probably designed homes for second homes for people who only use their second home, 5 or 6 weeks per year. And so we often also partner with designers and real estate agents and other types of businesses to help people sell down their properties as well through this model. So that would be another way to collaborate, and we're always open to new ideas as well, of course.
Well, it seemed that so many people wanted to hang the timeshare label on you, right? That was one of the objections that they tried to raise with you. Break that down, right?
Yeah, so it's actually quite different than a timeshare. There are some similarities in the sense that you're sharing time, but that's about where the similarities end. The two big differences are, first, the type of property. These are residential single-family homes owned by a small group of people, versus timeshares tend to be like hotels and resort properties with hundreds of rooms and thousands of members of the program. The second big difference is that this is ownership. You actually own real estate and not time. And so what I mean by that, to just further illustrate that point, once a home is fully sold and all the owners have been identified, the owners own 100% of the home. So our company retains no ownership at all. Structurally and legally, it's no different than you and 3 or 4 of your friends owning property together. And that's very different than the old timeshare model. The better analogy is just friends owning property together.
Right. Okay. And so they fully take ownership of the home. Picasso provides a level of service and maintenance. You're somewhat the steward of that property?
Yeah. I mean,
right?
Every little detail. Yep. Bill pay, maintenance, scheduling. And scheduling, that's probably the most important question that we get from people is like, doesn't everybody want 4th of July or New Year's or whatever the case may be? And the answer is no, actually, not everybody travels in the same way. It turns out that there's more diversity in travel preferences than you would imagine. But there are some, natural overlaps. And the way that we solve for that is we've designed a software that we call Smart Stay. And it's a really simple owner app with a calendar. And you go into the calendar and just block your time. Think of it like a shared Google Calendar, but with a lot of logic on the back end that's ensuring that the calendar is distributed fairly. So the net of what happens is everybody gets their pro rata share of the entire calendar. So if you own 1/8 of the home, you're going to get 1/8 of the peak season, 1/8 of the non-peak season, and 1/8 of the holiday time.
Okay. And if I wanted more time, I could buy more than 1/8 share. I could buy a quarter, right? I could buy.
Yeah, quarter is pretty common. Every once in a while we see 3 or 4/8, but I would say 1/8 is definitely the most common because that's how often most people use a second home, and then a quarter is the second most common use case.
Okay. You also mentioned that right now, partially because you don't want to take away a certain level of housing stock. Your homes are in vacation markets often, and they're pricey, right? They're multi-million-dollar homes that you're selling fractions of,
Yep.
right? But you're imagining a day where you can come to a more accessible level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, our vision long term is that families with more than 100,000 in household income will be able to own a second home through this model, which may seem like a stretch right now, given the current markets we've been talking about, because home prices are so expensive in places like Aspen or Park City. But once we get into sort of these regional, what we call secondary second home markets, places that are regionally relevant, that if you're from a certain town, like for example, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio originally, and there's a couple of lakes that people go to in Cincinnati. One of them's called Lake Cumberland. I would bet that nobody in the room, unless you're from Cincinnati, has heard of Lake Cumberland. But
got to visit. It's beautiful.
If you live in Cincinnati, Lake Cumberland's a big deal, and it's a very regionally relevant market. And there's versions of markets like that for pretty much every town. So once we get into those markets where home prices are more affordable, share prices will come down. But right now, I mean, we started in very luxury markets. Largely because that's where most of our buyers were looking right out of the gate. And I think it was also really beneficial for us to anchor the brand in that way at a very luxury price point.
So, because you've been in real estate for a long time, what do you make of this real estate market right now? And is this unlike anything that you've seen in your career? I mean, or did it feel this way prior to the previous housing crisis and the economic troubles we had?
Yeah, this is definitely different. I would say that the biggest shift that has happened that's impacting housing is the work from home phenomenon. It's obviously impacting the way that people outfit and design their homes, as I'm sure you guys spend a lot of time thinking about, from home offices to home gyms and Peloton rooms and all that good stuff. But in terms of like the macro shift, I would say that the best way to describe it is that people used to be, locked into certain areas because of where they had to spend their time during the week. And now many people have the freedom to work remote, either part-time or full-time, and that's empowering people with flexibility. And that flexibility is influencing people to rethink how and where they live and work. So we're seeing a few things play out. First is that people are migrating to second home destinations, and the prices are going nuts for the reasons that I described before. But the second thing that we're seeing that's pretty interesting is we're seeing people gravitate towards these second home destinations that previously weren't on the map at a national scale. And like one example of that is there's a county in Utah called Rich County that I had never heard of, before this second home shift. And like Lake Cumberland, most of you probably haven't heard of Rich County either. It's like the hottest market in Utah, where 60% of mortgage applications are happening in Rich County. And it's because the median home price in that county was like $300 and something thousand when all this madness started. And because people have the freedom to work anywhere, they're gravitating towards places that previously weren't, on the top of your radar. And we're seeing that impact prices. So prices in Rich County have gone up like 60% year over year, which is, well above national averages. And there's versions of that all over the country. Like Truckee is one that has been a second home market, but people used to desire living on the lake in Lake Tahoe or around the lake. And now arguably Truckee's more desirable than being on the lake. Or Joshua Tree, which is just outside of Palm Springs. Like these are places that just weren't as practical before. And now they're not just practical, but they're becoming very desirable.
So you mentioned Spain. Did we mention they're going into Spain? So tell me how that's going to work. And as you think about rolling Europe out, will I be able to buy a fraction of a home in Spain or France or
yeah, totally
anywhere I want?
Yeah, anywhere in the world. And I obviously there's a lot of value that gets added through the professional management here in the U.S. Like not having to worry about details such as bill pay or maintenance is a big deal. in home ownership. But when you talk about purchasing real estate in another country, there's another added complexity, which is just the unfamiliarity of how transactions work in that country,
Sure.
which is definitely going to be a benefit of owning through Picasso. Like we have teams of people that are tax and legal specialists and real estate partners in all these markets, and we're doing a lot of that legwork to make second home ownership much easier in lots of areas. And we hope that someday Picasso is available, everywhere or almost everywhere around the world. But as I mentioned, we're very early on the journey, and we have
got a lot of work to do
and road to climb. Yeah.
And skeptics to convince, it sounds like.
Skeptics will take care of themselves. I've always another quote to leave you guys with, Steve Jobs. One of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes, he says, if you want everybody to like you, go sell ice cream. And I'm at a point now where I just focus on, the mission surrounding the company with great people, and, time will tell the truth.
Time will tell, and you're not gonna worry about that.
That's
We
right.
didn't have time for questions, but if people wanted to ask questions of Austin, I know he's going to hang around a little bit afterwards, and people can reach out to you via email, right?
Yeah, so my email, if you have any questions or are interested in working with us, we'd love to hear from you. My email is austin@pacaso.com, PACASO.com. And you can also follow us at Picasso Homes or at Picasso Homes on Instagram. And thank you guys again for
there
the
you go.
opportunity.
Please join me in thanking Austin.